Never let your emotions overpower your intelligence. Napoleon Bonaparte. Most people believe that caring deeply is a virtue. They think passion is the engine of success, that constant effort and emotional investment are the keys to achieving your goals. This is a comforting lie. The truth is, excessive emotional attachment is a strategic weakness. It blinds you, makes you predictable, and turns you into a pawn in someone else's game. Winners understand the power of strategic indifference. It isn't about apathy, it is about calculated detachment. It's about understanding that your emotions are valuable resources, not to be squandered on every passing whim or manufactured crisis. It's about recognizing that the world is full of manipulators who will exploit your feelings for their own gain. They dangle carrots of hope and wield sticks of fear, knowing that emotional reactions are far easier to control than rational decisions. Strategic indifference is your shield against these attacks. Think of a chess master. Does he rage when he loses a pawn? Does he celebrate wildly when he captures a rook? No. He assesses the board, calculates the odds, and makes the most logical move, regardless of his personal feelings. He understands that each piece is a tool, each move a step in a larger strategy. He remains detached from the individual losses and victories, focusing instead on the ultimate goal, checkmate. This same principle applies to every aspect of life. Whether you're negotiating a business deal, navigating a complex relationship, or pursuing a long-term ambition, emotional detachment is your greatest asset. It allows you to see the situation clearly, identify the key players, and anticipate their moves. It prevents you from making impulsive decisions based on fear, anger, or desperation. It empowers you to act with cold, calculated precision. The emotionally invested are easily baited, their reactions predictable and controllable. They broadcast their desires and fears, making themselves vulnerable to manipulation. Strategic indifference, on the other hand, keeps your intentions hidden, your reactions measured. It forces your opponents to guess, to second-guess, to waste their energy trying to decipher your motives. While they are distracted by your perceived lack of emotion, you are quietly building your advantage, positioning yourself for the final strike. This isn't about being cold-hearted or uncaring. It's about directing your emotions strategically, channeling them into actions that serve your long-term goals. It's about recognizing that true strength lies not in the intensity of your feelings, but in your ability to control them. The world rewards those who can think clearly, act decisively, and remain unfazed by the chaos around them. Embrace strategic indifference, and you will begin to see the world not as a battlefield of emotions, but as a chessboard of opportunities. Learn to play the game with a clear head and a steady hand, and victory will be within your reach. Strategic indifference isn't apathy. It's a calculated choice to prioritize objectives over immediate emotional gratification. Think of a chess grandmaster sacrificing a pawn. To an untrained observer, it might seem like a careless mistake, but the grandmaster sees further ahead, understanding that the temporary loss will create a positional advantage leading to victory. Similarly, in life, reacting emotionally to every slight or setback is like clinging to that pawn. It blinds you to the bigger picture, the strategic possibilities that lie beyond the immediate discomfort. The ability to detach, to analyze situations objectively, is the key to identifying those opportunities and exploiting them effectively. Consider the negotiator who remains calm and composed while the other party rages and threatens. Their emotional control allows them to maintain leverage, to extract concessions that would be impossible if they were caught up in the heat of the moment. Strategic indifference isn't about suppressing emotions entirely, but about choosing when and how to express them. It's about recognizing that emotions are tools, and like any tool, they can be used effectively or destructively. A master craftsman doesn't swing a hammer wildly. They use it with precision and control to shape their creation. Similarly, a strategic thinker uses their emotions with purpose, directing them towards achieving their goals, rather than allowing them to dictate their actions. The emotionally driven are like puppets, their strings pulled by external forces. Strategic indifference allows you to cut those strings, to become the puppeteer of your own destiny. This requires a deep understanding of human psychology, the ability to anticipate how others will react to your actions, and the discipline to resist the urge to retaliate or defend yourself emotionally. It's about understanding that silence can be more powerful than words, that inaction can be more effective than impulsive action. By cultivating strategic indifference, you create a shield against manipulation, a force field that protects you from the emotional storms that can derail your progress. This allows you to conserve your energy, to focus your attention on what truly matters, and to move forward with unwavering resolve. The world is full of distractions, of emotional triggers designed to provoke a reaction. Strategic indifference is the antidote to these distractions, the filter that allows you to see through the noise and focus on the signal. It's the ability to remain grounded in your purpose, to stay true to your goals, even when faced with adversity. Consider the ruthless business practices of certain tech giants. They operate in a realm where disruption is the norm, and survival depends on adapting faster and more ruthlessly than the competition. Strategic indifference is not merely a desirable trait, it's a prerequisite for sustained success. Imagine a scenario where a smaller startup launches a groundbreaking product that threatens to disrupt the market dominance of a tech behemoth. The immediate reaction from the established player might be to crush the upstart through aggressive marketing campaigns, predatory pricing strategies, or even outright acquisition. However, a truly strategically indifferent organization might choose a different path, one that appears, on the surface, to be passive or even disinterested. They might analyze the smaller company's technology, assess its long-term viability, and identify potential weaknesses in its business model. Instead of launching a frontal assault, they might patiently wait for the startup to stumble, to make a critical error in judgment, or to run out of funding. They understand that a direct confrontation could galvanize support for the underdog, attracting unwanted attention from regulators and potentially damaging their own reputation. The strategic choice, therefore, is often to do nothing, to allow the startup to self-destruct under the weight of its own ambition or inexperience. This isn't necessarily driven by malice, but rather by a cold, calculated assessment of the most efficient and effective way to protect their own interests. It's a recognition that sometimes the best move is no move at all, that patience and observation can be more powerful weapons than brute force. This approach demands a high degree of emotional detachment from the situation. Executives must be able to resist the urge to react impulsively, to defend their market share with immediate and decisive action. They must be willing to tolerate short-term losses in order to achieve long-term gains. This can be particularly challenging in a culture that values speed and aggression, where leaders are often rewarded for their ability to make quick decisions and take decisive action. Strategic indifference requires a different kind of leadership, one that is characterized by patience, discipline, and a willingness to embrace uncertainty. It demands the ability to see the bigger picture, to anticipate future trends, and to make decisions that are aligned with the organization's long-term strategic goals. Furthermore, this indifference extends beyond just competitors. It includes employees, customers, and even the broader public. A company might choose to ignore criticism from certain segments of its customer base, focusing instead on serving the needs of its most profitable customers. It might implement policies that are unpopular with its employees, but that are deemed necessary to improve efficiency or reduce costs. It might engage in practices that are ethically questionable, but that are considered to be within the bounds of legality. In each of these cases, the company is prioritizing its own interests above the concerns of others. This is not to say that such behavior is always justified or ethical. However, it is a reflection of the reality that businesses often operate in a highly competitive and unforgiving environment, where survival depends on making tough choices. The ability to remain strategically indifferent, to prioritize long-term goals over short-term emotions, is often a key determinant of success. It's a mindset that allows companies to navigate complex challenges, to adapt to changing market conditions, and to emerge stronger and more resilient than their competitors. It's about recognizing that not every battle needs to be fought, that not every criticism needs to be addressed, and that sometimes the most effective strategy is to simply remain calm and focused on the ultimate objective. The key is to differentiate between what truly matters and what is merely noise, to avoid getting caught up in the emotional drama that often surrounds business decisions, and to maintain a clear and unwavering focus on the strategic priorities. This demands a high degree of self-awareness, the ability to recognize your own emotional biases and to prevent them from clouding your judgment. It requires the discipline to resist the urge to react impulsively, to take a step back and consider the potential consequences of your actions before you commit to a particular course of action. Ultimately, strategic indifference is not about being cold or uncaring. It's about being rational, disciplined, and focused on achieving your goals. It's about understanding that emotions can be powerful tools, but that they must be used with intention and purpose, rather than allowed to dictate your actions. It's about cultivating a mindset that allows you to see through the noise, to identify the critical signals, and to make decisions that are aligned with your long-term strategic objectives. In the harsh world of business, it can be the difference between survival and extinction. Strategic indifference, therefore, becomes a potent weapon in the arsenal of the successful organization. The trap lies in the inability to distinguish between genuine threats and manufactured drama. The weak are easily baited, drawn into conflicts that serve no purpose other than to deplete their resources and distract them from their goals. They react emotionally, lashing out at perceived slights and engaging in petty disputes that ultimately benefit their opponents. Their energy becomes fragmented, their focus scattered, and their strategic vision blurred. This is the predictable outcome of allowing ego to dictate action, of failing to cultivate the necessary detachment to see the larger game being played. These reactive patterns create a predictable profile, easily exploited by those who understand the power of strategic indifference. They become puppets on strings, dancing to the tune of their own insecurities, their every move anticipated and countered. The consequences are not merely financial or professional. They extend to personal well-being and overall life satisfaction. Constant engagement in unnecessary conflict breeds stress, anxiety, and a sense of perpetual victimhood. It erodes relationships, damages reputations, and creates a toxic environment that repels opportunity. The individual consumed by the need to respond to every provocation becomes trapped in a cycle of reactivity, unable to break free and pursue meaningful goals. They mistake activity for progress, confusing the constant flurry of responses with actual strategic movement. They fail to recognize that true power lies not in the ability to dominate every interaction, but in the wisdom to choose which battles to fight and which to ignore. This lack of discernment is often rooted in a deep-seated fear of vulnerability. The need to constantly defend oneself, to prove one's worth, stems from a fragile ego that cannot tolerate criticism or disagreement. It is a defense mechanism, a shield erected against the perceived threats of the outside world. But this shield, while providing a temporary sense of security, ultimately imprisons the individual, preventing them from experiencing genuine connection and growth. The inability to strategically ignore is further compounded by a lack of clear strategic goals. Without a well-defined vision of what success looks like, it becomes impossible to prioritize actions and filter out irrelevant distractions. Every issue seems equally important, every criticism equally valid, and every opportunity equally enticing. This lack of focus leads to a constant state of overwhelm, a feeling of being pulled in too many directions at once. The individual becomes paralyzed by indecision, unable to commit to a particular course of action and constantly second-guessing their choices. This is the antithesis of strategic thinking, which demands clarity of purpose, ruthless prioritization, and unwavering commitment to the chosen path. The trap, therefore, is not merely a tactical error. It is a fundamental failure of strategic thinking. It is a failure to understand the importance of emotional control, the power of selective engagement, and the necessity of a clear strategic vision. It is a failure to recognize that true strength lies not in the ability to react, but in the wisdom to choose when and how to act. It is a self-imposed prison, built brick by brick with emotional reactions, impulsive decisions, and a fundamental misunderstanding of the game being played. Escaping this trap requires a conscious effort to cultivate self-awareness, develop emotional discipline, and define clear strategic goals. It requires the willingness to challenge one's own assumptions, to embrace vulnerability, and to learn from past mistakes. It requires a fundamental shift in mindset, from reactivity to proactivity, from emotionality to rationality, from a focus on the immediate to a focus on the long term. It demands the courage to be indifferent to the noise, to stay focused on the signal, and to pursue one's goals with unwavering determination. The path to strategic indifference is not easy, but it is essential for those who seek to achieve lasting success and avoid the traps that ensnare the weak. Only by mastering this skill can one truly control their destiny and shape their own future. It demands constant vigilance, relentless self-reflection, and an unwavering commitment to the principles of strategic thinking. The art of strategic indifference, as it relates to the Machiavellian approach, is not about apathy or laziness. It is about the calculated and deliberate allocation of attention and energy. A true strategist understands that every interaction, every reaction, and every emotional investment carries a cost. To expend these resources indiscriminately is to bleed strength and expose vulnerabilities. Machiavelli, in his teachings, emphasizes the importance of controlling perception and maintaining a calculated distance. This distance allows for a clearer assessment of the situation, free from the distortions of emotional entanglement. It's a practice of observing, analyzing, and choosing the precise moment and method of engagement, if engagement is necessary at all. Many perceived slights and provocations are simply attempts to manipulate your actions. Reacting to them is to fall directly into the trap laid by your opponent, granting them control over your behavior and draining your focus from your own objectives. A strategically indifferent individual recognizes these ploys for what they are: distractions. They conserve their energy, refusing to be drawn into fruitless battles that serve only to deplete their resources and cloud their judgment. This is not to say that all challenges should be ignored, but rather that each should be evaluated with cold, calculating rationality. The question is not simply, how do I respond? But should I respond at all? And if so, what is the most effective response in terms of furthering my long-term goals? Often, the most powerful response is no response at all. Silence can be a potent weapon, creating uncertainty and forcing your opponent to second-guess their strategy. This is a key element of Machiavellian thinking, using the expectations and weaknesses of others against them. People expect a reaction, particularly when they believe they have provoked you. By denying them this satisfaction, you disrupt their plans and maintain control of the narrative. Strategic indifference also requires a deep understanding of human psychology. People are driven by emotions, insecurities, and a need for validation. A skilled strategist can exploit these vulnerabilities by remaining detached and objective. They can observe the emotional reactions of others, identifying their weaknesses and using this knowledge to their advantage. This is not about being cruel or malicious, but about being pragmatic and effective. In the game of power, emotions are liabilities and rationality is an asset. Machiavelli understood this principle implicitly, and his writings are filled with examples of how to use emotional detachment to gain and maintain control. Furthermore, strategic indifference is essential for maintaining a long-term perspective. The pursuit of ambitious goals requires patience, discipline, and the ability to withstand setbacks. Those who are easily swayed by emotions or distracted by trivial matters are unlikely to achieve lasting success. they will be constantly diverted from their path, reacting to every passing whim and falling prey to the manipulations of others. A strategically indifferent individual, on the other hand, remains focused on their objectives, ignoring the noise and staying true to their course. This requires a strong sense of self-belief and a willingness to withstand criticism and disapproval. It also requires the ability to delay gratification, to sacrifice short-term gains for long-term benefits. This is the essence of strategic thinking, understanding that true success is not achieved through impulsive actions or emotional reactions, but through careful planning, calculated risk-taking, and unwavering determination. The Machiavellian approach to strategic indifference is not about being heartless or uncaring. It is about being strategic in your interactions, understanding the power of calculated distance, and recognizing that true strength lies in the ability to control your emotions and focus on your long-term goals. It is about mastering the art of selective engagement, choosing your battles wisely, and refusing to be drawn into fruitless conflicts that serve only to deplete your resources and cloud your judgment. It is about understanding that in the game of power, emotional detachment is a weapon, and rationality is a shield. To truly master strategic indifference is to become a master of your own destiny. History is replete with examples of empires and military leaders who understood the power of strategic indifference. Consider the Roman Empire, which for centuries maintained its dominance through a combination of military might and calculated disinterest in the internal affairs of conquered territories. Rather than imposing a rigid, centralized system of control, the Romans often allowed local customs and traditions to continue, focusing instead on extracting resources and maintaining order. This policy of strategic indifference allowed the empire to govern a vast and diverse population with minimal resistance, as long as taxes were paid and Roman authority was respected. Local elites were often co-opted into the Roman system, further reducing the likelihood of rebellion. The Romans understood that attempting to micromanage every aspect of life in their conquered territories would be both impractical and counterproductive. By focusing on the essential elements of control and allowing local populations a degree of autonomy, they were able to maintain their power for centuries. This approach stands in stark contrast to empires that attempted to impose their own culture and values on conquered peoples, often leading to resentment and rebellion. Another example can be found in the strategies employed by certain military commanders throughout history. A classic case is that of General Ulysses S. Grant during the American Civil War. While other Union generals were often distracted by political considerations and public opinion, Grant remained laser-focused on the primary objective, defeating the Confederate Army. He understood that achieving this goal required a willingness to accept casualties and endure criticism, but he refused to be swayed by emotional appeals or short-term setbacks. Grant's strategic indifference to the noise and distractions surrounding the war allowed him to maintain a clear strategic vision and ultimately lead the Union to victory. He was not concerned with winning popularity contests or appeasing his critics. He was focused on winning the war. This required a degree of emotional detachment and a willingness to make difficult decisions, even when those decisions were unpopular. Furthermore, consider the example of the Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan. The Mongols were renowned for their ruthlessness and their ability to conquer vast territories with relatively small armies. A key element of their success was their strategic indifference to the traditional rules of warfare. They were willing to employ unconventional tactics, such as feigned retreats and surprise attacks, and they were not afraid to inflict massive casualties on their enemies. The Mongols understood that war was a brutal and unforgiving business, and they were not concerned with adhering to any artificial constraints. Their primary objective was to achieve victory, and they were willing to do whatever it took to achieve that goal. This strategic indifference to conventional norms allowed them to overcome numerically superior forces and establish one of the largest empires in history. These historical examples illustrate the power of strategic indifference in achieving long-term success. Whether in the realm of empire building or military strategy, the ability to remain focused on the primary objective, to ignore distractions and criticisms, and to make difficult decisions without being swayed by emotion is essential for achieving lasting results. Those who allow themselves to be consumed by short-term concerns or emotional reactions are unlikely to achieve the same level of success as those who are able to maintain a strategic distance and remain focused on the long game. Strategic indifference is not about being uncaring or insensitive. It is about being disciplined and focused, about prioritizing long-term goals over short-term gains, and about understanding that true success often requires a degree of emotional detachment. It is a mindset that allows individuals and organizations to navigate complex and challenging situations with clarity, purpose, and unwavering determination. It is the ability to see the forest for the trees, to understand the underlying patterns and forces at play, and to make decisions that are aligned with long-term objectives, even when those decisions are unpopular or require short-term sacrifices. Strategic indifference, at its core, is a psychological tool. It is a method of mental discipline that allows an individual to navigate the complexities of decision-making without succumbing to the distractions of emotional impulses or the pressures of immediate gratification. Understanding the psychology behind this approach requires exploring the interplay between emotion, reason, and long-term goals. Many decisions are driven by emotions such as fear, anger, or the desire for instant reward. These emotions can cloud judgment, leading to impulsive actions that undermine long-term objectives. Strategic indifference acts as a buffer against these emotional distractions, allowing the individual to evaluate situations with a clear and rational mind. This does not mean suppressing emotions entirely. Rather, it means recognizing their influence and consciously choosing to prioritize reason and strategic thinking. It's about understanding that while emotions provide valuable information, they should not be the sole drivers of decision-making. The ability to maintain a strategic distance also involves a certain degree of self-awareness. It requires understanding one's own emotional triggers and biases, recognizing situations where emotions are likely to cloud judgment, and developing strategies for mitigating their impact. This might involve taking a step back from a situation, seeking counsel from trusted advisors, or employing techniques such as mindfulness or meditation to cultivate a sense of calm and detachment. Cultivating this detachment is not about denying one's humanity. It is about recognizing that in certain situations, emotional reactions can be detrimental to achieving desired outcomes. It's about developing the mental fortitude to make difficult decisions, even when those decisions are emotionally challenging. This fortitude is built through practice and repetition, by consciously choosing to prioritize reason over emotion in a variety of situations. Furthermore, strategic indifference requires a deep understanding of human psychology. It involves recognizing the emotional vulnerabilities of others and anticipating their reactions to various strategies and tactics. This understanding can be used to one's advantage, allowing one to anticipate and neutralize opposition, to persuade and influence others, and to create a favorable environment for achieving one's goals. This is not about manipulation or exploitation. It is about understanding the human condition and using that understanding to navigate complex social and political landscapes. It is about recognizing that people are often motivated by emotions, and that understanding these emotions can be a powerful tool for achieving strategic objectives. The long game, a critical component of strategic indifference, necessitates delayed gratification and the acceptance of short-term sacrifices for the sake of long-term gains. This requires a certain level of patience and discipline, the ability to resist the allure of instant rewards, and to remain focused on the ultimate objective. This is often difficult, as humans are naturally inclined to seek immediate gratification. However, the ability to delay gratification is a key characteristic of successful individuals and organizations. It allows them to invest in the future, to build long-term relationships, and to weather short-term setbacks without losing sight of their ultimate goals. It also requires a strong belief in the validity of the long-term plan. The individual must have faith that the sacrifices they are making today will ultimately lead to a more desirable outcome in the future. This belief is often reinforced by evidence of progress, by seeing the fruits of their labor, and by receiving encouragement from others. The ability to ignore distractions and criticisms is also essential for maintaining strategic indifference. There will always be naysayers and critics who attempt to undermine one's efforts. It is important to filter out this noise and to remain focused on the task at hand. This does not mean ignoring all feedback. Constructive criticism can be valuable for identifying weaknesses and improving one's approach. However, it is important to be discerning about the source of the criticism and to avoid being swayed by those who are motivated by malice or jealousy. The truly strategically indifferent person is one who assesses all input with a cold, calculating eye, discarding that which is irrelevant and incorporating that which serves the ultimate goal. This requires a high degree of self-confidence and a strong belief in one's own abilities. In essence, strategic indifference is a complex psychological strategy that involves emotional detachment, rational decision-making, a focus on long-term goals, and the ability to ignore distractions. It is a mindset that allows individuals and organizations to navigate complex and challenging situations with clarity, purpose, and unwavering determination. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and a deep understanding of human psychology. When properly implemented, strategic indifference can be a powerful tool for achieving lasting success. Consider the rise and reign of Genghis Khan. His strategic indifference was not merely about ignoring the suffering of others, although that was certainly a component. It was a comprehensive philosophy applied to every aspect of his military and political endeavors. He faced a fragmented and often hostile landscape of warring tribes, each with their own agendas and grievances. An emotionally driven leader might have attempted to appease these tribes, to negotiate endlessly, to seek a peace based on compromise and mutual respect. But Genghis Khan understood that such an approach would be slow, inefficient, and ultimately ineffective. He saw the bigger picture, a unified Mongol nation capable of dominating its rivals. To achieve this, he adopted a policy of calculated ruthlessness, prioritizing the long-term goal of unity above the short-term concerns of individual tribes. He strategically ignored pleas for mercy, dismissed complaints about unfair treatment, and disregarded the emotional cost of his decisions, all in service of his grand vision. This wasn't simply a matter of being cruel. It was a calculated strategy. Each act of brutality, each instance of ignoring pleas for leniency, sent a clear message. Resistance was futile, and obedience was rewarded. He systematically dismantled existing power structures, replacing them with a meritocratic system based on loyalty and competence, regardless of tribal affiliation. This created a powerful incentive for individuals to align themselves with his vision, even if it meant betraying their former allegiances. He understood that emotional bonds could be broken, that fear and ambition were powerful motivators. His indifference to the traditional tribal hierarchies allowed him to create a new order, one that was far more efficient and effective than anything that had come before. He was willing to sacrifice individual lives and cultural traditions in order to achieve a greater strategic advantage. This wasn't a moral judgment, it was a strategic calculation. The long-term benefit of a unified and dominant Mongol nation outweighed the short-term cost of individual suffering. His armies moved with unparalleled speed and decisiveness, often bypassing heavily fortified cities to strike at weaker, more vulnerable targets. This forced his enemies to react defensively, constantly shifting their resources and undermining their morale. He was indifferent to the traditional rules of warfare, focusing instead on maximizing his own strategic advantage. This often involved unconventional tactics, such as feigned retreats, ambushes, and psychological warfare. He understood that the key to victory was not simply brute force, but rather the ability to outmaneuver and outthink his opponents. His indifference extended to his own personal comfort and well-being. He lived a Spartan lifestyle, sharing the hardships of his soldiers and demanding the same level of discipline and dedication from himself as he did from others. This earned him the respect and loyalty of his troops, who were willing to follow him into battle even in the face of overwhelming odds. He understood that leadership was not about privilege, but about service and sacrifice. He was indifferent to the temptations of luxury and power, focusing instead on the task at hand, the conquest and unification of the Mongol Empire. The scale of his indifference was breathtaking. He redrew the map of Asia, reshaped the course of history, and left an indelible mark on the world. He demonstrated the power of strategic indifference to achieve seemingly impossible goals. His example serves as a reminder that emotional detachment, rational decision-making, and a focus on long-term goals can be powerful tools for overcoming even the most daunting challenges. He wasn't seeking approval, he was seeking results. The trap lies in needing everyone to understand, to approve, to validate your choices. It's a vulnerability, an open flank. Your opponent will exploit that need, drawing you into arguments, distractions, and ultimately defeat. Think of the political arena, a candidate obsessed with responding to every criticism, every accusation, expends their energy on defense instead of advancing their agenda. They become reactive, predictable, and ultimately controlled by the narrative of their detractors. Strategic indifference is not about being rude or dismissive. It's about recognizing that some battles are not worth fighting. Some opinions are irrelevant. Some criticisms are simply noise. The emotionally invested react. The strategically indifferent plan. They conserve their energy, their resources, for the moves that truly matter. They understand that every action has a cost, and they choose their actions deliberately with a clear understanding of the potential return on investment. Consider the chess player who ignores the taunts and jeers of the crowd, focusing solely on the board, calculating the optimal move. They are indifferent to the emotional pressure, to the distractions, because their goal is clear: to win the game. The need for approval is a prison. It limits your options, restricts your movement, and makes you vulnerable to manipulation. Those who seek constant validation are easily swayed by flattery, by fear, by any emotional appeal that promises to alleviate their insecurities. The strategically indifferent are immune to these tactics. They are driven by a clear purpose, a long-term vision, and they are willing to endure criticism, disapproval, and even outright hostility in pursuit of their goals. They understand that true strength lies not in seeking approval, but in achieving results. The weak are predictable, driven by basic desires and needs: safety, comfort, and social approval. They can be easily manipulated because their priorities are transparent. The strategically indifferent conceal their true intentions, their deepest desires, beneath a veneer of calm detachment. They observe, they analyze, they plan, and they strike when the moment is right, often catching their opponents completely off guard. It's not about lacking empathy or compassion. It's about maintaining control. It's about refusing to be swayed by emotions that can cloud judgment and lead to poor decisions. Imagine a poker player who betrays their hand with every twitch, every expression. Their opponents can read them like a book, anticipating their moves and exploiting their weaknesses. The strategically indifferent poker player maintains a poker face, revealing nothing, giving their opponents no information to work with. They are masters of deception, using feigned weakness or strength to mislead their opponents and lure them into traps. This isn't about dishonesty, it's about strategic ambiguity. It's about controlling the flow of information, revealing only what is necessary to achieve the desired outcome. The weak crave certainty. They seek guarantees, assurances, and promises. They are afraid of risk, of uncertainty, and they will often sacrifice potential gains for the illusion of safety. The strategically indifferent embrace uncertainty. They understand that risk is inherent in any endeavor, and they are willing to take calculated risks in pursuit of greater rewards. They are not reckless, but they are not afraid to venture into the unknown, to explore new possibilities, and to challenge conventional wisdom. They are comfortable with ambiguity, with the lack of perfect information, and they are able to make decisions based on incomplete data, trusting their instincts and their judgment. The desire for control is a powerful motivator, but it can also be a trap. Those who try to control every aspect of their environment become rigid, inflexible, and unable to adapt to changing circumstances. The strategically indifferent understand that true control lies not in dominating the external world, but in mastering themselves. They focus on their own actions, their own decisions, and their own responses, rather than trying to control the behavior of others. They are adaptable, resilient, and able to thrive in chaotic environments. The need to be liked, to be accepted, is a fundamental human desire, but it can also be a crippling weakness. Those who prioritize social approval over their own goals will often compromise their values, abandon their principles, and betray their own interests. The strategically indifferent are willing to be disliked, to be misunderstood, and even to be ostracized if it means staying true to their purpose. They understand that true success often requires challenging the status quo, disrupting established norms, and upsetting the sensibilities of others. They are not afraid to stand alone, to be different, to be authentic. Strategic indifference is not apathy, nor is it detachment. It is a calculated allocation of emotional resources, a deliberate choice to engage only with what truly matters. It is about understanding the finite nature of your energy and directing it with precision, like a laser beam cutting through the fog of distractions. Emotions are powerful forces, but they can also be blinding, leading to impulsive decisions and irrational behavior. The strategically indifferent do not suppress their emotions, but they do not allow them to dictate their actions. They observe their feelings with detached curiosity, analyzing their origins and understanding their potential impact before choosing whether or not to act on them. This is not about being emotionless, but about being emotionally intelligent, about harnessing the power of emotions for strategic advantage. It demands ruthless self-honesty, a willingness to confront your own biases, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. It requires a deep understanding of your own motivations and desires, as well as the motivations and desires of others. It involves anticipating the consequences of your actions and planning for all possible outcomes, both positive and negative. It's about recognizing the patterns of human behavior, the predictable reactions and responses that drive so much of what people do. By understanding these patterns, you can anticipate their moves, influence their decisions, and ultimately control the narrative. True mastery comes not from overpowering your opponents, but from understanding them, from knowing their weaknesses and exploiting their vulnerabilities. It is about playing the long game, about sacrificing short-term gains for long-term advantage. It requires patience, discipline, and an unwavering focus on your ultimate objective. The strategically indifferent are masters of deception, not in the sense of being dishonest, but in the sense of being able to control the information that others receive. They understand the power of perception and are able to shape the narrative to their advantage, concealing their true intentions and manipulating the expectations of others. They are skilled at reading people, at detecting subtle cues and hidden agendas, and they use this knowledge to their advantage, anticipating their moves and countering their strategies.